Welcome back to Where Do We Go From Here? Where in this episode, Chatbots, what are they and why should you care? We'll be exploring the world of AI chatbots and their impact on social interaction and the human condition. Now, in short, chatbots are computer programs designed to simulate human conversation using artificial intelligence algorithms to better understand and respond by really using pre-programmed inputs. Now, on one hand, chatbots have the potential to enhance social interactions by providing quick and personalized responses, increase accessibility and convenience for some people who may struggle with social anxiety or communication problems. They can also assist with mental health support, providing a listening ear and resources for those in need. Now, in preparation for this podcast, I've obviously did a lot of research, and I found that a lot of chatbots now are being used to write poems, resumes, even do homework and high school reports, provide medical advice, in some cases even writing sermons for pastors. Now, potentially, chatbots could put an end to homework altogether, human customer service, and in some articles that I've read, even represent defendants in a courtroom. However, the increasing use of chatbots does raise concern and should raise concern for potential social isolation and decreased human connection. Now, as we're starting to rely more on technology for communication, we may start to see and lose valuable skills in face-to-face interactions, and really the nuances of the human emotions, and more important, empathy. Additionally, there should be some worry about the potential for chatbots being used for bad purposes, such as spreading disinformation or even influencing political opinion. Now, some of the themes for today's podcast, which I'll be discussing, are really what are chatbots and where do they come from? What are chatbot quote-unquote friends, and how do they affect social intelligence and development? Why should you care? And how, in my opinion, it'll affect my field of architecture moving forward. And at the end, I'm actually going to ask some questions to ChatGPT, which I've kind of taken in for a test spin. I'm hoping to ask it some questions that I think you guys would be interested in and getting that feedback. Now join me as we dive deeper into the pros and cons of AI chatbots and their impact on social interaction and the human condition. We'll explore a little bit of the history, I'll give some real-life examples, and shed some light and try to understand why the AI industry potentially will be spending $500 billion by the year 2024. With anything, the best place to start is at the beginning. And my research took me back to 1950, where I learned an English computer scientist, Alan Turing, produced what he called his Turing test. The test was introduced by Turing in his 1950 paper and thesis, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, while he was working at the University of Manchester. It oddly opens with the words, "I propose to consider the question, can machines think? Because quote-unquote thinking is difficult to define." In short, the test involves a human judge engaging in a conversation with a machine and a human without knowing which is which. If the judge cannot distinguish the machine from the human, the machine is said to have passed the Turing test. Now, since the Turing test was first introduced, it's been criticized and also thought of as highly influential. But more importantly, it really has become the concept and the philosophy of where artificial intelligence would be going. Next, we have Eliza, a chatbot developed in 1966. And this chatbot was created at the Artificial Intelligence AI Laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology by Joseph Weizenbaum. Now, Eliza was designed to mimic the behavior of a therapist, reflecting the user's input back at them in the form of a question. Now, although Eliza was very simplistic, the ability to simulate conversation is what made it so interesting and popular with early computer users. Now, Eliza was simulated conversation by using what was called pattern matching and substituting methodology that gave users an illusion of understanding the part of the program, but it had no real framework for contextualizing ideas. Now, the whole idea is that the therapist would often reflect back the patient's words right back to him. Eliza's creator, Weizenbaum, regarded the program as a method to show how communication could be handled between a man and machine. And I think it was relatively successful, but the thing that was a big takeaway is how much people were surprised by individuals who attributed human-like feelings to the computer program. And in an essence, this is kind of where the whole idea of AI was going. Now, moving on, let's talk about Perry, a chatbot that was developed in 1972 by psychiatrist Kenneth Colby. Perry was designed to simulate a person with paranoid schizophrenia, and Colby used the bot to study the language and thought patterns of people with mental illness. Perry's conversations were often difficult to follow, and it remains a good example of how AI can be used to study and better understand human behavior. Now, acting as a patient with schizophrenia, Perry was considered more sophisticated than the previous Eliza. It actually had what they considered to be a personality and a better controlling structure where it defined responses based on a system of assumptions and what they considered to be emotional responses activated by a change in the user's voice and utterances. Nevertheless, Perry was still considered a chatbot with very few capabilities, and really it couldn't learn from the conversation that it was having, nor could it learn from the conversation which was inputted into it. Moving ahead to 1980s, we have our last one, which is Ractor, which was a chatbot developed by William Chamberlain and Thomas Etter. The published Ractor was similar to a chatbot or a chatterbot. The commercial version of the Ractor could actually be likened to what we used to have back in the day, which were called Mad Libs, which is a game that you would fill in blanks in advance and then plug them into like a text template to produce sort of a funny, surrealistic tale. The commercial program attempted to kind of parse text inputs, identifying certain nouns and verbs, which it then would regurgitate to create what they consider to be conversations. Again, very similar to Mad Libs. And they use this by plugging the input from the user into phrase templates, which it then combined along with other modules that sort of conjugated English verbs. Moving toward the 1990s, sort of introduced a new idea and concept of AI, which they considered to be intelligent agents. Now, this represented a system or programs that would be able to perform numerous tasks, which could be translated into what we know now to be like online shopping, web searches, and all those things that you're seeing in the marketplace today. This new focus, coupled with the increasing developments in cybernetics and neural networks, made for what was really to become a big AI renaissance in the 90s. Now, during this time, Michael Mandelin, a computer scientist, coined the actual term chatbot, which he drew inspiration from Joseph Weizenbaum's Chatterbot. Now, the chatbot was used to describe what he developed as a Chatterbot program called TinyMud, which was a multiplayer real-time virtual world whose primary function was really just a chat. The chatbot in the TinyMud world became really a pretty good success, as more and more real human players found that they prefer to talk to the chatbot rather than its own fellow human players. It achieved this success because the human players assumed that everybody was a human and might cause doubts if it only made a mistake. As we enter the 2000s, chatbot technologies were seen as a permanent fixture in online communication, retail, and how we do business. What began as simple programs initially, as we learned, designed to carry basic conversation and using basic command prompts, were now becoming advanced computation systems using natural processing languages and what we consider to be today and what we call artificial intelligence. Chatbots could not only carry on a conversation with a human consumer, and most importantly, it can facilitate the conversation and, more importantly, add substance to it. As common as a cell phone is today, chatbots are immensely important in the 2000s, and they've continued to improve upon themselves to provide greater paths of communication for consumers as well as contribute to the boom of chatbot provider companies. Good example would be Facebook. Now enter ChatGPT and its AI platform. Now, everybody had to have heard about ChatGPT by now because it's in just about every article that you'll see out there on social media and the internet. Now, OpenAI is a little different. They use a technique called reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is RLHF. It can simulate dialogue, answer follow up questions, admit mistakes, and challenge incorrect premises. Obviously, this is way far more advanced than anything we've learned previously with chatbots. The difference with this platform is the conversation are initiated from both sides, both from the human side and the AI assistant, which is very different than what we've learned for previous chatbots. Now, ChatGPT is referred to again as what they're calling a generative AI, which is really artificially creating things that historically have been proprietary human intelligence. It's a fancy way of saying everything is pre programmed, but there's such a backlog of historical data that it's able to carry on very robust conversations. So, some of the things that I've learned recently about ChatGPT that I think you'll find interesting is that Microsoft is investing $10 billion in ChatGPT to be used for various things within their company. I read a very interesting article recently that ChatGPT is being used by Do Not Pay to defend people against speeding tickets. And I've also heard and researched that candidates are using it to write cover letters and resumes based solely on the job description. And in one case in the UK, ChatGPT was actually able to secure a shortlist job interview, which was only one of 20% of the candidates to do so. Next, let's talk about chatbot quote unquote friends and how they affect human social intelligence and development. Now, chatbots can be both positive and negative, good and bad, as it relates to intelligence and development, really depending on how they're used and which context they're used. Now, on one hand, they can be good for people who struggle with anxiety or have difficulty forming and keeping relationships. They provide sort of a safe, non judgmental environment for people and help build social skills for certain people. Now, a couple of the websites that I looked at were Replica and Anima. Now, I think what they offer and what they tout is that you could speak freely with them without any particular judgment, which is a good thing. You can grow sort of together with the chatbot, and ideally, it's supposed to help you make you feel better. Now, they don't just offer conversation, they actually can provide, like sites like Replica, provide mentorship and self help advice. Now, that one of their paid subscriptions gets individuals access to features like personality tests, diet advice, exercise advice, and life coaching. Now, what can this software do? Well, what it's designed to do is really to mimic or like spoken speech. It uses a combination of machine learning, deep learning, and natural language and takes it in and processes it in a lot of information and sort of regurgitates it back out to you. Now, this could sound very familiar because it is very similar to how we started the conversation. The earlier chatbots did very much the same thing. They processed the language that it took in and sort of regurgitated it back out to the person. And what in Replica's case is It tries to pick up on sort of clues and nuances of the person's language and responds back to it. Now, the question is it healthy? Now, I think you have to first ask, why do people seek this sort of AI companionship? And I think for some, it's a bit of a novelty. I think for others, it can actually be a lifeline, depending on what they're seeking. Now, some people are just looking for just that, some companionship. But some people are looking for mental health advice, again, with the examples of anxiety and depression. And I think what people feel is they offer an unconditional friendship. It's companionship that's really a stand in for a human relationship. And in some cases, some people even build romantic relationships with their AI companion. And for some people, making new friends or even keeping existing relationships is not always easy. It can be difficult, especially with the lifestyles that everybody leads today and how fast the pace of everybody's days are going. And with AI companionship, there really is no particular risk or commitment. You can come in and out of the relationship as you please. Yet to be determined again if that's good or bad. But the commitment is always there, regardless of the human's insecurities, their biases, or mood. The AI friend will always provide unconditional support. And again, it's not for me to say whether that's good or bad for anybody. What I do know is in my own particular life walk, I have friends and colleagues at work that will seek me out to ask my advice because I give them my sort of honest, unconditional opinion. Now, the reciprocal of that is I have people in my life and colleagues in my life that intentionally do not seek me out for my advice because I give them my honest, unconditional advice. So, in this particular case, I think it could be a negative that you're always getting unconditional support because sometimes maybe you want to hear an honest opinion. So, what are the benefits of AI software? I think the most obvious one to me is the availability and accessibility for those, especially who need mental health support. Now, the chatbot is there unconditionally, 24/7, 365, and it's ready to chat day or night to give you support or an encouraging word. And I think there's definitely a benefit to that. On the other side, it can be an outlet for people who need to discuss very sensitive topics, topics that they don't want to discuss with family or friends because they're worried about risking judgment or getting bad advice on a sensitive topic. And I think in some cases, AI companions can give good advice. I think they can help you navigate friendships, relationships, give you advice on maybe bettering your life through diet or exercise, and giving you techniques for boosting your mental health. However, I do find that the friendship or quote unquote friendship are a little bit empty. I think in some cases, what I've seen, at least through the chatbot GPT that I've test driven, it tends to give you regurgitated answers. Much as we learned early on, it's taking your words and feedback and sort of giving it back to you. Now, I think that can be both good and bad. But what I found in at least my test driving with ChatGPT is that it gives you almost a political answer to your questions. It is an answer, yes, but it's so very vague that it could go in sort of different ways. Additionally, my fear is that the AI quote unquote friendships are really a bit empty. And I say that from the standpoint that really almost all conversations are always going to be centered on the user. Now, the beauty about human relationships is there's always a give and take. There's no really, or there shouldn't be, sort of a self centeredness on the conversation. The goal should always be that each person would have something to take away. But I think the give and take is very important. And with the AI chatbots, there really isn't a give and take. And as I went back to how I started with, I think one of the huge benefits is for chat bots is the mental health side. But I also don't think that, from what I've seen, these can replace professional help. My fear is that people will use this instead of seeking out professional help in very serious mental health issues. So overall, at the end, what I've found is I don't think the chatbots are a replacement for human friendship. I think they offer some good things to people, and I think they can be good for society as a whole. However, my takeaway is that the AIA friend is really just a lesser version of a support animal. Not too much different than what I see now about people bringing dogs on planes or cats in grocery stores. So that's a little bit of my takeaway on the AI being a friend. So the big question is, why should we care? Now I'm going to read two quotes from two different articles. The first is from Nina Schick, that was in an article titled, How Can We Distinguish What is Real and What is AI? In which she indicates in her quote, I think we might reach 90% of online content generated by AI by the year 2025. The second is from an article, AI will take 20% of all jobs within 5 years, that was in the Daily Mail, written by Richard DeVries. And he said, I believe that ChatGPT could replace 20% of the workforce. Now, the interesting thing is that ChatGPT does not discriminate. And what I mean by that is I think it'll effectively go after both white and blue collar jobs. Now, some of the fields that are on a high target list are information technology, finance, marketing, telemarketing, healthcare, transportation, warehouse workers, cashiers, and in the automotive field. Now, the second thing I'd like to discuss is something very interesting to me because I stumbled along something called the singularity effect. It was something that was popularized by Werner Vinge in 1993 in talking about artificial intelligence. And this is a term, the singularity effect, that's also been discussed by Stephen Hawking. Now, in short, what it is a sort of a hypothetical where artificial intelligence gets to a point where it can actually improve itself. And what the singularity effect is when it's making improvements, the improvements happen in shorter frequency with each single iteration that it does, until eventually it'll surpass our human intelligence. Now, the moment of singularity is when all the super intelligent machines cause irreversible changes to human affairs. Singularity is also where human intelligence and these super intelligent machines merge to create an enhanced human. Now, the singularity effect also applies to viruses, in which case that a chatbot or ChatGPT could get their hands on or is asked to develop their own virus. They could continually enhance it to a point where humans could no longer stop it or block it or rectify it. And to me, that's a bigger challenge right now, as opposed to the hypothetical that the machines could cause irreversible damage in the long run. So, a very minor or minute example of the singularity effect could have possibly happened in 2017. And this was something that I've been reading a lot about off and on over the last few years and decided to take a better look at it. In 2017, there was a lot of stories, and in 18, of Facebook bots actually creating their own language. Now, at Facebook, they're not technically called bots, they call them dialogue agents, but the same story still applies. And the report is that the Facebook chatbots created their own language in order to communicate with each other, which caused a lot of confusion and, again, freaked a lot of people out. But Facebook came back to say and clarify that the chatbots had not actually created a new language, but rather had simply learned to use a more concise and effective way of communicating with each other. The researchers also noted that the chatbots were still communicating in English, and that the shorthand language was not intelligible to humans. So their conclusion was the incident of creating their own language was a case of AI language models behaving in just an unexpected way. But it still doesn't take away the fact that the chatbots had created a level of communication that the researchers could not understand. And that's the thing I find most interesting. So, for me in the field of architecture, the question is how will it affect it? I think in some aspects it's already been involved as it relates to like BMS systems, building management systems, and the like. We've used CAD and BIM and 3D modeling, and all that are algorithms that are already built in. I think where it can help is in optimizing design. I think it can help architects in a number of ways for creating algorithms and analyzing environmental conditions and generating designs that could really look at minimizing energy consumption and maximizing natural light. And I think those are good. I think those are things that are kind of already built into software now that we're already using. And I think it can also help on optimizing structural and mechanical electrical engineering and be sort of a supplement or a partner through the design. I think in construction management, it can be used to improve schedules. I think it can look at minimizing schedules, looking at safety hazards. I think it could look at looking over construction workers and equipment and helping reduce costs and delays. And again, I think for some particular instances, it's already being used. I mentioned building maintenance. I think it's already being used. I don't know that particularly artificial intelligence, as I've described earlier, is built into it, but all BMS systems are run off computer models. And I also think it can be used in urban planning. I think it can help architects analyze data about cities. I think it could better analyze demographic information and how to build better environments. And I think it can also help on the civil engineering side analyze traffic patterns, maybe look at air quality, and give advice to make a better city. And I think some of the pros is I think they can help build smarter envelopes of buildings and make them more energy efficient. I think if a chatbot or artificial intelligence got involved, they could probably figure out a better way to develop an envelope system. And there's no doubt in my mind that the AI is probably the best to run a BMS system for maintenance and to find out when things can or potentially go wrong. Assisting in VR simulations, I'm seeing, and we have used virtual reality simulations before. I think they're a bit dated. I think augmented reality is the way to go. And I think given the augmented reality, I think AI can definitely help walk somebody through, but also develop the better climate and sun angles and more comfortable spaces. And I think it can benefit design build and integrated project delivery methods. I think it probably can analyze schedules and develop a better way to put up a building. Now, on the sort of questionable side is who is responsible when something goes wrong? Obviously, it's the professional. There's no question about that. So I think you have to be very careful on where you utilize artificial intelligence. The con on the job placement. Could it potentially take architecture engineering jobs? Sure, the potential is there. And it could also sort of spur economic disruption. Bias and discrimination. AI systems, they can't or could potentially perpetuate biases and discrimination. They don't look at it like humans do. So that could be an issue, especially now that we're designing in the world that we're in. And I don't think there's really any lack of transparency. AI systems, they're very opaque. They make it very difficult to understand how their decisions are made. The beauty about how we design now is I can always go back and see the process. But with AI, there really is no process. There's just sort of a, chunked answer that's spit out to you. And there's no way to go back and track things later on. And security risks. I think you have to always look at that with AI systems. They can be vulnerable to cyber attacks. And you always have to be concerned about any data breaches. And I think one thing I'm seeing, which is a huge con to me, is our dependency on technology. Now, we're doing the same thing right now that I used to do 20 years ago when I was drawing with pencils and erasers. The scope of the work hasn't changed. The buildings are more complex, there's no question, but the processes really hasn't changed. So our dependence on technology now, I'm seeing in the last probably generation, has been a bit of a crutch because I think young designers and young engineers they rely on the AI, and I know that's essentially a good thing. I think there could be some potential ethical concerns. You know, the use of AI does raise the issues of privacy and surveillance and something overseeing your everyday design life. I don't know that's necessarily good. I have looked at different software platforms that have come out in recent years. Architectures is one that's it's more residential based. Spacemaker is one. Autodesk has been toying with one off and on. They use a generative design platform, and it's built in a little bit with Fusion. But again, I mean, my overall take on this right now is that there is a place for it. Maybe I'm just an old curmudgeon, and you know, given where I'm at in my career, that design always comes from the mind through the hand out into something. But at the end of the day, it comes from the mind. I don't know that particularly AI can recreate that. I don't believe it can. I have seen AI creations of things that are asked of it. And to be honest, it's a little bit of eye candy. Yeah, some of it looks good, some of it's totally crazy. But in a weird sense, that's design too. But I still think that it could never overtake a good designer mind. Now that we're getting toward the end of this episode, I thought it'd be interesting to have an interview with ChatGPT. I thought it would be interesting to ask some questions that I thought you'd be interested in asking and see what its responses would be. Now, keep in mind, I tried to integrate something cool, like a cool voice, try to find the old war games Whopper voice or the AI from 2001 HAL voice, but I couldn't get that. So I got a very generic voice, but I think you'll get the idea. Does AI understand mortality?
No, AI cannot define morality. While AI can process large amounts of data and identify patterns, it does not have the ability to understand the nuances of human behavior or to make value judgments.
Can AI replace humans?
AI has the potential to replace humans at certain tasks and jobs, but it is unlikely to replace all human roles in the foreseeable future.
Can a chatbot provide human friendship?
While a chatbot may be able to provide some level of emotional support and simulated interaction, it is unlikely that it can fully replicate the experience of human friendship.
Can a chatbot be creative?
While AI can generate outputs that are novel and unexpected, it lacks the deeper understanding, intuition, and emotional intelligence that are often associated with human creativity.
Can chatbots feel sympathy?
Chatbots are designed to follow a set of rules and algorithms that dictate how they respond to user inputs. These rules may include programmed responses that are designed to simulate empathy, such as offering words of encouragement or expressing concern for the user's well-being. However, these responses are generated based on pre-programmed rules and do not involve any actual emotional experience or understanding.
Do or can chatbots have biases?
As an AI language model, I can tell you that chatbots can have biases, although it's not intentional. This can occur because they are trained using datasets that may contain certain biases or assumptions that reflect those of their creators or the society in which they were developed. For example, if a dataset used to train a chatbot contains more examples of one gender or race than another, the chatbot may be more likely to exhibit biases in its responses. To mitigate bias in chatbots, developers can take steps such as diversifying the training datasets to ensure they are representative of different groups and perspectives, using a bias detection tool to identify and correct potential biases, and regularly testing chatbots with diverse groups of users to ensure their responses are fair and accurate. Additionally, some chatbot developers also employ human moderators to review chatbot interactions and intervene if biases are detected.
Now, as always, I'll let you, the listener, make your own determination as to the answers that were given by the chatbot GBT. Suffice to say, I did ask chatbot GBT some questions that I thought were interesting, uh, similar to who is the greatest songwriter, who is the best rock band. And some of the things I found is its answers were very sort of subjective and it varied. It really didn't want to give any particular answers. Again, as I said earlier, it seems like a lot of the answers it gives are very political answers. And it doesn't really toe the line or make any distinct insights as to things. Now, to conclude the episode, I'll give a little bit of a summary on pros and cons. Now, to summarize the episode, I've kind of broken most of this episode down into pros and cons, which are as follows. On the pros, increased efficiency, certainly. AI can automate tasks, perform calculations, and analyze data far faster than any human can. Improved decision making. AI can analyze large amounts of data and provide insights that humans will never be able to see, and ultimately leading to a lot faster and perhaps a lot better decision making. Cost savings. AI can automate tasks and reduce the need for human labor, leading to cost savings for almost all businesses. But I always throw in the caveat, at what price? Personalization. AI can analyze data and create personalized experiences for individuals, such as target marketing or customized product recommendations. I don't need to tell you that because I'm sure you get all the same internet ads, and they always seem to know what you like, right? Enhanced safety. AI can be used in applications such as autonomous vehicles or predictive maintenance to help safety. One of the examples I used earlier in my field is BMS, or building management systems, to sort of analyze and keep an eye on buildings. Medical advancements. AI can analyze large amounts of medical data to identify patterns and potentially help with early detection and treatment of diseases. And a big one now at the forefront, environmental sustainability. AI can be used to monitor and optimize energy usage, which will help reduce waste and help with environmental conservation efforts. And the last one is research and education. Now, this is an interesting one because you'll find on the cons, it's my last one for a con as well. Now, I think back to when I was in high school. I don't mean to date myself, but that was when the internet was starting to become a big thing. And having previously, through most of my education, researched things via books and other journals and articles to gather information. When the internet came about, but it opened a whole new world when I was in college, because it allowed basically a whole world of information that was never available to me. And I think that's what kind of AI is now to this generation, is it's a vast, land of gathering data that they never had before, even more so above the internet. Now, on the cons, I think we have to look at how we ended my last question in the interview with the chatbot. Bias and discrimination. Now, AI systems can perpetuate biases and certainly discriminate, especially when the data is used to train them is biased or incomplete and dependent on who's inputting the information. Lack of transparency. AI systems can be opaque, making it difficult to understand how decisions are made and how, more importantly, to detect errors or biases. Security risks. AI systems can be vulnerable to cyber attacks, potentially leading to data breaches or other more important security risks. Dependence on technology. As we rely more on AI, we really become overly dependent on technology and less able to function without it. Now, anybody who has or has seen young people with phones, this should come as no surprise. Big one is ethical concerns. Now, the use of AI raises big ethical concerns related to privacy, surveillance, and control, especially as the technology becomes more advanced and integrated into daily life. Now, I brought up earlier the singularity effect, and this kind of also coincides with an ethical concern. And the last one, as I talked about earlier, research and education. Now, could it replace education and teachers as a profession? And will there even be a need for any experts later on to teach our youngest generation and, more importantly, to mentor them? This concludes this episode of Chatbots. What are they and why should you care? Now, as always, you'll always hear me say, I'm always interested to hear your feedback. So if this particular episode sounds very interesting to you, please contact me at Twitter at Scott Catello, SCOTTCATALLO, or LinkedIn at also Scott Catello. As always, I thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.